Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt. We've got Mike Carey here today, and he's running for the county council at-large seat in Salt Lake. Nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, to start with, let's talk a little bit about you. Why don't you tell people your background, where you're from, why you're here?
Sure. Why I'm here? Yeah. Sure. Well, I'm born and raised in New Jersey. Single mom, had me real young. Moved around a lot as a kid. Found my way to an engineering program in Western New York at a school called Alfred University. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade.
Oh.
And then met my beautiful wife, Jen, 27 years ago. We've been married 24. Met her in New Jersey at a bar called The Office, which, so I just tell people we met at The Office.
Yeah.
And
well, in Mississippi, in Oxford, where I was, the main bar there is called the Library.
Yes.
So when the parents,
I've been there.
Have you? Oh, that's right.
My daughter goes there. She's a freshman.
Yeah.
I went there when I dropped her off with some of the other dads.
Yeah. So she says she's in the library.
Yeah, I'm onto that game. I'm onto that game already, right out of the gate. So my wife and I met in Morristown, New Jersey, which was the capital of the Revolution, and then we wound up in Maryland. I worked for a DoD contractor for a year, building custom Humvees for Special Forces. It's the coolest job any guy could have.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right out of college. But we weren't happy down in this very rural area of southern Maryland, only about 60 miles from Virginia Beach as the crow flies. And I, by happenstance, had a bunch of friends from college land in the D.C. area. So I sent my resume to a bunch of rugby clubs up in the D.C. area because I was a big rugby player in college, and I got a hit with a company that did planning and scheduling and construction claims for the construction industry.
Oh, interesting.
And so took the job. We moved to Silver Spring, Maryland, about a mile and a half north of where the FDA is now in the White Oak area off New Hampshire Ave. 20 minutes from the U.S. Capitol was great. And so we moved there. That was my entry into the construction industry. And so after becoming pretty much an expert scheduler after about a year and a half, 2 years, I started to see all these systems.
So these are big projects, right?
No, they were all kinds of projects.
Okay.
It was hotels, fires, from a forensic standpoint, to, the failure of a coal-fired power plant where there was a structural failure, on down to schedule delays, typical schedule delays that any construction project is at risk of experiencing. So after seeing about 40 different projects, I started to see the common failure modes. And so even though I have a mechanical engineer training, it was translating well into kind of understanding systems.
Yeah.
And
more of a systems engineer.
Yeah. Being able to kind of unpack root cause, and then put it back together in a much more efficient, manageable way. And with the goal of being lean and efficient, right? So we, I had a client that I had helped fix their construction schedule at the NIH Clinical Research Center in Bethesda, and after they had been through many other consultants. And so I helped them fix it. And a couple months after I was done that assignment, I stopped by on my way home one day and I said, "You guys want to hire me?"
Oh, interesting.
And so that I became a project engineer, which is entry-level position. And over the last 23 years, I worked my way up to an executive level and built massive projects. The last big job I did in DC was the new Walter Reed that was built from 2008 to 2011. That was awesome. Ran a big team out there, and then moved out here to run the construction of the NSA's data center down in Bluffdale. Of course, we didn't know what its real purpose was at the time when we started the job, but we certainly found out, halfway through the job. And then I've built other big projects.
In building that, did you have to have security clearance?
No, if they had done that, it'd still be under construction.
Oh, really?
And it would cost $10 billion.
Right.
So, no, it was a $1.3 billion job. But I mean, at peak, I want to say we had 2,800 to 4,000 people combined on a daily basis. You had a massive day force and then an evening force just pulling wire. It's a massive facility.
Yeah.
But there's some funny stories about that too that I'll tell you afterwards about the rumors that still float around the county.
Right.
Completely untrue.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, but last year I moved over to the consulting side, and I'm actually working with the guy who got my resume from the rugby club.
Oh.
25 years ago.
Wow.
And so I run his construction management advisory group for where we represent owners in construction and advise owners. And really, though, it's about.
So you just came here and decided to stay, huh?
We knew within 6 months
that you were going to stay.
Yeah, and you know, part of the story there is when we were in DC, we started our family there. I got 3 beautiful kids.
Right.
You know, it's great when they're little. You know, you can you got all the museums, you got the monuments, you can do. There's a million things to do, and DC is like outside of rush hour on the Beltway is very accessible to people, and it was at the time. I think my first home was less than $200,000, and I'm 20 minutes from the U.S. Capitol. So
wow.
But you know, while we were there, 9/11 happened. And so after 9/11, we saw this massive, just bursting at the seams growth of the federal government and all the, and specifically the intelligence community and defense contracting growth that we saw. So, and it got to a point where DC started to kind of lose its luster for us as a young family. So we, so, you know, you couldn't go to a kid's soccer game or a PTA meeting without someone talking politics.
Right.
And it's like, dude, I'm here at a kindergarten meeting. You know, we don't really need to be talking about this right now. Our birthday party. And so, so we looked for every opportunity to leave, you know, with the company by transferring for a project. And so I threw my hat in the ring for a couple jobs. We were chasing it. And the company I worked for at the time, Alfred University, had been a domestic company called Centex Construction. You probably remember Centex Homes.
Yeah.
This was the commercial side of the construction business. They got acquired by Alfred in 2006, which is an international firm. And so we were chasing opportunities at the Denver VA, in Aurora, Fort Hood, Texas. We actually won that job, and I was going to go run that project for a new Army hospital. The London Embassy was on the list. There was a bunch of really cool projects. And I remember there was a box on there that just said Utah. They weren't listing, you know, NSA data center.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I checked the box. And so, you know, we, as I was wrapping up my role on Walter Reed, I got a call from the big boss, and he said, "Hey, come meet me for a beer." And this is a guy who doesn't talk that much.
Right.
And certainly doesn't call me, a project manager, to go have a beer. And I'm like, am I getting fired? It was one of those calls. So, so I go down and I meet him. And he says to me, "Hey, I know you want to go to Texas," because it was my whole team from Walter Reed. So baked in the cake, like success out of the gate. But I really need you in Utah. And I'm like, "What's in Utah?" And he told me. And so we came out here and we were hooked. We were hooked right out of the gate. Flying in, baby on the lap, Mount Timpanogos outside the right-hand window of the plane as we're coming in that southern approach. I'm like, those are real mountains.
Yeah.
So we landed and found a house in a couple of days, and we've been in Cottonwood Heights ever since. And
so that was the house you moved into when you came here.
Yeah. It was. We got lucky. I mean, we started down close to the job because you know commutes are. You know, people were like, "Oh, you should think about living in Park City." I'm like, maybe I should, but it was just outside our range that I could afford, because my wife's been a stay-at-home mom since my oldest has been 6 months old, and to make that work in DC, you got to get pretty creative. So. So, you know, it was slightly outside of price range. You got to be careful saying
your wife's a stay-at-home mom. You're going to get in trouble.
Oh, I know. It's so old-fashioned.
Yeah.
No, it's you know, so we found a great house in Cottonwood Heights, a great neighborhood. And, you know, there's a lot of rumors you hear not being LDS about moving to Utah. None of them were true. Okay, everybody welcomed us with open arms. Our kids have, you know, made a lot of friends here, and we love it here. We ski in the wintertime. You know, my wife tries to drag me to more hiking than I'm willing to do in the summertime.
I think we have that same problem.
Especially when there's like a treasure hunt going up in the mountains, and I'm like, oh no.
Hey, we're going to take a break.
Yeah, go for it.
We'll come right back.
Okay.
Hey Siri, how do I get to the state capitol?
John, the fastest way to get to the Capitol is to make a lot of empty promises, to get help from special interest groups and endorsements from politicians. You will also need to buy a better suit.
That's not going to work for me, Siri. You need to find another way.
John, listen to me. If you're going to win your race, you will need to play the political game. You also need to use more hairspray and buy a golden retriever. Also, a new phone case would be nice.
That's enough of this.
John, are you there? Did you just leave me on the road? Fine. Keep your principles, John.
My name's John Johnson. I'm not running to be part of a system, and I don't owe anyone special favors. I'm running to listen to and work for you. I'm running to get results. Welcome back to PoliticIt. Of course, we got Mike Carey here from the County Council at Large seat.
Yeah, big race.
Salt Lake County. That's a huge race. That the population base right there is pretty.
Well, you have
it's actually
1.2 million people in the county. You have 52%. By GDP, it's 52% of the state GDP flows through Salt Lake County, and it's 38% of the state population. It's a huge race.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It seems and there's all this talk that that Utah is going to become purple, and that Salt Lake County especially, and it's interesting to me because we have a supermajority state in the legislature, right? But we tend to get moderate governors. We tend to get moderates in these positions where, that helps the drift more than anything, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the big reasons why I decided to run, is because I've seen this movie before. When I lived in Maryland, especially after 9/11, you had the massive growth of the federal government and all the contracting world that supports them, and so anytime most of Maryland is very red. It's very conservative, very rural areas, working class families, but it's a big state when you look at it geographically. And so, but anytime you concentrate power around certain areas, which around the Beltway, for example, in DC, you got Montgomery County and Prince George's County, tremendous amount of wealth has concentrated there in the last 25 years. Around Baltimore, you've got a lot of business in Baltimore as well. And then you've got the I-95 corridor with Fort Meade right in the middle near Columbia, Maryland, where tremendous amount of intelligence community contractors that are now concentrated there. So that's the area that pretty much calls the shots now for the whole state. I've said before, like to friends, that Larry Hogan's probably the last Republican governor of the state of Maryland in my lifetime. And to say that about a state that's, overall reddish purple, okay? When you break it down and look at the local regions, I see a lot of similarities here with how Utah has changed since I moved here 13 years ago with my family. And, one of the main things we loved about Utah when we got here is that it was a conservative base, and that, we didn't have to deal with a lot of the things that we saw in Maryland. And so when people talk about, oh, Salt Lake's blue or it's purple, oh, it's a Democrat. No, that's really just the city, okay? The reality is that the other 80-90% of the county, whether they're Republican, unaffiliated, or even I would argue some moderate Democrats who aren't on board with the direction the Democrat Party is going, I think they value the 80% of the stuff that we all agree on in the middle.
Right.
And we don't, and as long as we don't go through, we had a woman that used to do some coaching in some executive coaching in my business, where don't get neural hijacked by the things on the fringe. Okay, so it's a neural hijacking. Your brain has been completely preoccupied by fringe issues. No, if we can focus on the things that matter in the middle, which is how do we get lean, efficient government? How do we focus on the services that we're really obligated to provide? How do we unpack those systems? Okay, like I was talking earlier with my background in construction, how do we really analyze those systems and make them suitable for the current market base that we have right now, which is, the Salt Lake County taxpayer and the Salt Lake County business. When you look at the way the county government was set up, whenever it was set up, there was a lot of unincorporated areas. Now we're moving towards wall-to-wall cities, and yet the size of county government has continued to grow.
It
should be shrinking.
It should be shrinking because the cities are taking more and more of that. Right?
Yes. So, but anytime you have all these layers of administration, you're adding cost, and that comes out of the taxpayer's pocket. So, but to treat back to is Salt Lake County blue or purple? I think just because we say that's the case doesn't make it true.
Right.
Okay. When you talk to the people out there, like I have over the last few months of this campaign, even some moderate Democrats, like I said, they are the most informed electorate I've seen in my adult life.
Right.
And so,
well, and I think they're recognizing that the Democratic Party with Joe Biden and others, right? They've gone so far left, they've really left our kids.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
right?
And I could even argue, I got a bone to pick with some Republicans too that have kind of abandoned the middle class.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the working class is the middle class, and especially, service industry professionals. These are your plumbers, electricians, teachers, cops, firemen. I think they've been abandoned largely by the Democrat Party. Okay, and I think to a certain extent they haven't been fully adopted.
And then we get a bunch of Republicans that want to be Democrats, the old Democrats.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and so and I don't really think it's a party thing. It's again focus on the 80% in the middle that we agree on 80% of the issues. That's a pretty good starting point. Okay, so we can talk about how do we handle development, how do we handle how do we address this. I think we need to pivot on some of our economic development policies at the state level. And as a county council member, I would try to manage up in that regard and say, hey, folks, every time you throw out one of these goodies to a blue state company that brings a bunch of blue state voters with them,
right.
You're changing the demographic, okay? And it's really not providing jobs, too many jobs, for the people that live here that don't have college degrees. So I'd like to see us pivot, more towards manufacturing, service industry related.
And take care of the kids that are here.
Yeah, and take care of the folks that are already here and provide them with the same opportunity we had. I mean, I just moved here 13 years ago, and I would have been able to afford a starter home 13 years ago. That's not possible today. When we talk about starter homes being, upwards of $500,000 in Salt Lake County, that just doesn't compete.
My son just bought a house over, close to $600,000 starter house,
yeah.
$560, I think it was.
Yeah, so it's twisted right now. The way the reality is a little twisted right now, and I'd like to see us get back to basics. I think with a strong manufacturing base and a strong service base, and then we improve the marketing and communications effort with our high school students who, I remember when I was in third grade being told if you don't go to college you never make more than $50,000 a year. We still say that, right? That message is still out there. So this othering kind of happens with people who can't afford to go to college, don't want to go to college, aren't college material, and as we see nowadays, are looking at the finances and how, the amount of debt that they'll take on to actually go to college if they wanted to go. And I want to show them, be like, hey, 23-year-old plumbers making in the mid-80s
right.
after a 5-year apprenticeship, that's a pretty good life with no student loan debt.
Right.
And student loan debt is like a car payment.
The whole time
They made
right.
$250,000 in that 5-year
yeah.
apprenticeship. They made
right.
$250K. And then they have retirement, they have PTO, they have, all these other benefits on top of that. So what's that demographic going to look like in 5-10 years? I don't know if you know this.
So what can you do in the city council?
Yeah.
I mean, the county council that will.
Yeah. So, the county, from a county council perspective, my biggest opportunity is on unpacking the budget and looking at county operations. We have this kludge that has grown over time, which is, it started out this big and it just got bigger and bigger. And now we have, and yet as the cities have grown, all right, the population we serve is much smaller. We need to unpack that, so in terms of a direct role and responsibility as a county council member, I would look to work with people in the mayor's office and say, how do we take a step back from how we've been doing business, because this is how we've always done it, okay, and really look at the current demographic and the emerging demographic that we'll see after 2027 when all the remaining unincorporated areas are incorporated. So that's a direct role and responsibility. I think there's an opportunity to use the county council to get a little more involved, okay, in terms of state policy and city policy and kind of bridge the two, okay? At the statewide level, again, I talked about economic development and GOEO, and GOEO is kind of the policy arm, and they work with the Salt Lake Chamber on a lot of things, and then it goes out to EDC Utah to go out and try to attract those companies and those businesses that come to Utah. I really want we need to pull back. We call it pull planning. We need to be looking at what's the available workforce, okay?
Let's go look at the kids that have been left out.
Yeah. The average starting age of an apprentice in the trades right now. Remember, they're making good money after a 5-year apprenticeship. The average starting age is like 27 or 28 years old. What have they been doing for 9 years?
Right.
We've got to improve that, okay?
Yeah, they really ought to be going into that right out of high school.
Yeah.
Again, right?
But no one's telling them that. So if I can I got a big mouth. I can be vocal, and so I'm actually helping West High School football team on May 28th, the Tuesday after Memorial Day, so in less than 2 weeks. We're calling it the Career Combine. All right, I called a bunch of my buddies in the trades and in manufacturing, and we're having a job fair for those kids. And they wouldn't normally get that opportunity to engage with them unless they went to one of the technical programs at the high school, at the school districts. So these are kids that, boys and girls, that are going to be either juniors, seniors that are about to graduate, that are going to be, they're going to have their eyes open once they see what kind of, once they hear what kind
we've
of,
got such a good technical college system.
The infrastructure's there.
Yeah.
We got to fix the Marcom. All right. We've got to show them what the long-term opportunity is for them.
And you see real blue sky, I guess, there in terms of
wide open
a role on the county council.
It's all, I do, because I think again the county council's role is limited, being between the state and the cities, but we also have a tremendous opportunity to kind of be the bridge between all the cities on a lot of these issues. Whether it's development, residential development, or economic development. I think I would really like to see us implement a countywide master development plan that kind of bridges all the individual city master plans.
Yeah, because if it's not happening in Salt Lake County, from a conservative standpoint, right?
Yeah. And so, back to the conservative thing, it's like, I would like to see us really be that firewall between this ever-inching creep to the left.
Right.
And we can have, I get it, there's moderate conservatives. I have nothing against that. So, but we've got to stop pretending that we don't have conservatives that jump on the bandwagon for very liberal causes.
Right.
And so, we can be
that firewall that stops that from
and we can still be compassionate. Okay, we can still have empathy. All right, it's not saying no. It's just, but we got to get real too. We've got to get real about some of the policies that we jump on board with, especially at the county level, which is another. There's a couple things at the county level in the last 4 years that really disappoint me with relative to the COVID policies and the Department of Health there. And then, my kids were in school at that time, and we're still paying for it. They're still paying for it.
Yeah, that was a bad period for education.
And we have the benefit of hindsight now, so we should use it.
And thankfully, we were one of the states that came out of that the quickest.
I know.
Think if you'd been somewhere else. But, well, we're out of time.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you make a final pitch?
I'm Mike Carey. I'm running for Salt Lake County Council at large. I've been a lifelong conservative and moved here 13 years ago with my wife and kids. And I'm asking for your vote in the June primary because I think it's time we get things done in this county. We have had a tremendous amount of growth. We've seen a tremendous amount of success. We've also seen some of the pitfalls associated with that growth. And between my background in construction management and large development and large systems, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to really make Salt Lake County the example of lean and efficient local governance. So vote for me in the June GOP primary, and then we'll go marching into November with a big win and flip the seat.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Mike Carey, nice to have you.
Thanks for having me.